Have you ever felt like your brain just isn't as, spongy as it used to be? Like learning a new skill as an adult is just as constant uphill battle? Well, it turns out there's a really solid scientific reason for that. And even better, there's a science-backed way to get around it. Today, we're going to unpack the incredible work of Stanford neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman to figure out the rules of neuroplasticity, that's your brain's ability to change, and learn how we can literally, intentionally rewire our own brains. Let's get into it. Right? It's the question that drives so many of us crazy. How can a little kid just absorb a new language in a few months, while we struggle for years just to order a coffee on vacation? Is our brain just broken after a certain point? Well, the good news is, absolutely not. The real answer isn't about getting older, it's about the very architecture of our brains, and how that structure is fundamentally different when we're young versus when we're adults. So to really get this, we need a powerful analogy that Dr. Huberman uses all the time. Think of your brain as being in one of two states. It's either a sponge or it's a superhighway. And understanding this difference is a total game changer for how you approach learning, because these two brain states operate on completely different rules. When we're young, up to about age 25, our brain is like this wild, overgrown garden of neural connections. It's just designed to soak up everything from the environment passively. Learning is effortless, it's almost accidental. The brain's main job is just to trim away the connections it doesn't end up needing. But as we get older, that garden gets paved over into a set of really efficient superhighways. Now, this is awesome for doing things we already know how to do, but it's rigid. You can't just wander off the established path. To learn something new, you have to intentionally, deliberately force a change. And this is where we have to bust a huge popular myth. Dr. Huberman is super clear about this. That pop science idea that every little thing you do rewires your adult brain, it's just false. You can't just passively listen to a podcast or go to one lecture and expect new brain circuits to magically form. So if passive experience isn't enough anymore, what is? How do we actually tell our adult brain, hey, time to change? The secret isn't some new app or a magic pill. It's actually in our own neurochemistry. Think of adult brain change, adult plasticity, as being locked behind a big, heavy gate. And to open that gate, you need a very specific set of chemical keys. And the best part? You already have these keys. You just need to learn how to find them and use them at exactly the right time. The first key is epinephrine, which you probably know as adrenaline. This is that jolt of alertness you feel when you're excited or nervous, or maybe you've just had a really strong cup of coffee. It's like a system-wide wake-up call for your entire brain. It doesn't point anywhere specific. It just screams, pay attention, something important is happening and you need to be ready for it. Now, if epinephrine is the big floodlight that lights up the whole stage, our second key, acetylcholine, is the laser-sharp spotlight that hones in on a single performer. When you are intensely focused on one thing, like reading a tricky sentence or practicing a guitar chord, acetylcholine gets released in the exact brain areas you're using. It highlights those specific circuits and puts a little chemical tag on them that says, this is what's important. This is the circuit we need to change later. So it's not one or the other. You absolutely need both. You need that broad alertness from epinephrine to create the right conditions for change, and then you need that precision focus from acetylcholine to point that change to the right place. Without both of these keys turning in the lock at the same time, that gate to learning stays slammed shut. Okay, so we know we need alertness and focus. We need adrenaline and a spotlight. But how in the world do we summon them on command when we sit down to learn? This is where the science gets incredibly practical. So let's get into the actual behavioral tools you can use to take control of your brain's learning system right now. And here it is. This is the secret weapon in your learning arsenal. It's Dr. Huberman's core principle. Mental focus follows visual focus. This is the hack. You can't just will yourself to concentrate out of thin air, but you can control what you do with your eyes. And by controlling your visual field, you are literally hijacking your brain's attention system to create that intense mental focus. And the technique itself is ridiculously simple. Before you start a learning session, just pick a single, small point on your computer screen or on the page in front of you, and just stare at it. Narrow your entire world down to just that one spot. Do this for about a minute or two. You might even feel a little bit agitated or antsy, but that's a good sign. It means it's working. You are physically commanding your brain to get into a state of deep focus. So what's the magic happening in your brain when you do this? Well, by forcing your eyes to converge like that, you're flipping a very specific switch deep in your brainstem. And this little switch controls the release of both of our key chemicals, the alertness from epinephrine and the focus from acetylcholine. So you're not just hoping for focus to show up. You are using a simple physical action to manufacture the precise neurochemical cocktail you need for your brain to change.
So how long should you try to stay in this deep focus state? The science points to a sweet spot of about 90 minutes. It turns out our brains naturally operate in these cycles of intense focus and then fatigue, and they last about an hour and a half. So one solid 90-minute session is your target. It's pretty much the ideal length for triggering real, meaningful change without totally burning out.
All right, so you've done the hard part, right? You got alert, you focus like a laser for 90 minutes, you're done. But what if I told you that the most crucial part of the entire learning process hasn't even happened yet? The actual rewiring of your brain, that happens somewhere else entirely. So, if the learning, the actual change, isn't happening during that intense study session, when is it? Think of the focused work as just step one. It's like an architect drawing up the blueprints and marking which walls need to be renovated. The actual construction happens much, much later, after the work crew has already gone home for the day. That's right, the actual physical strengthening and weakening of your neural connections, the literal rewiring of your brain, happens primarily when you are in deep sleep. That focus session is what puts those little renovate here flags on the right circuits. But it's your brain's overnight construction crew that comes in during sleep to do the real work. Without quality sleep, those blueprints from your study session just get tossed in the trash. So you have to think of learning as a two-act play. Act 1 is the focused work, where you mark all the connections for change. Act 2 is deep rest, where those changes are actually made permanent. And here's a pro tip from the research: a short 20-minute nap or something called a non-sleep deep rest, or NSDR protocol. Think of it like a guided meditation that puts your brain in a super restorative state. Right after a learning session can dramatically speed up this whole rewiring process. Okay, we have gone through a ton of science on brain change, from the architecture of our brains to the neurochemicals that act as keys, and finally to the critical role of sleep. Now, let's put it all together. Here is your simple 4-step protocol for learning absolutely anything as an adult. Here is it, the full recipe for adult learning. Step 1, get alert. Find your motivation, have that cup of coffee. Step 2, focus intensely for about 90 minutes, using that visual trick to lock in. Step 3, and this one is so important, deliberately disengage. Let your mind drift. Go for a walk, take that 20-minute power nap, or do an NSDR session. And finally, step 4, get a full night of high-quality sleep. That is the cycle. That's the formula. And just so you know, this isn't some new self-help fad. This whole protocol is built on a foundation of decades of rigorous, Nobel Prize-winning neuroscience. Back in the 60s and 70s, researchers David Hubel and Torsten Wiesel actually won the Nobel Prize for discovering these critical periods, those times when the young brain is like a sponge. For a long time, we thought those windows just closed forever. But then pioneers like Dr. Mike Merzenich at UCSF came along and proved that with the right kind of focused attention, the adult brain can become just as plastic. They showed us how to reopen those windows for learning. So you see, the ability to change your brain isn't some superpower you lose after childhood. It's a skill. And now you have the instruction manual. You've got the science-backed keys to unlock your brain's incredible potential for change. The only question left is, what are you going to build?